Okay, quick little revision presentation around the bigger mark questions about policies. So just as a kind of a quick shorthand, what the policies are targeted towards is achieving the 7 objectives. So stable, increasing, high economic growth, for the UK about 2 to 3%, price stability, low stable inflation for the UK 2%, low unemployment or full employment, and higher employment. So for the UK currently around 5% unemployment is what our target is, and a satisfactory balance of payments, which in the short term would be a balanced but potentially a surplus in the longer term. Then you have a fairer distribution of income, balanced government budget, and environmental protection or sustainable economic growth. Those questions around policies, if they are evaluative questions, will either come in the assess 10 mark question, the discuss 15 mark question, or within the choice question at the end of the paper, the evaluate 20 mark question. Tends to have a structure around something like the extent to which the policy will do something, the effectiveness of the policy to do something, or the impacts of a policy change. Then it will either talk in broad terms, such as demand side policies for these two. So it might refer to them as demand side policies. And if it does, then you can choose which policy you focus on, or it might specifically say monetary policy or fiscal policy or supply side policy, or it might go down to the specifics of that policy. So it might not mention monetary policy, but it might look at the effectiveness of interest rates or quantitative easing to achieve a target. Now, it may specifically say increases or decreases in interest rates, or it might just talk in broad terms. Same with taxing and spending, it might tell you an increase or a decrease. Your supply side policies, the assumption for most of those questions is that you are increasing the supply side policy. So an improvement in health, improvement in education, you're privatising or deregulating, or you're doing some labour market reforms. So there tends to be kind of 3 key types of policy. One of them around the quality and quantity of people through education and healthcare. You sometimes might see a mention of immigration, which would be a quantity of labour, and privatisation and deregulation around increasing profitability for businesses, leading to more investment, and the same for labour market reforms, making workers more flexible but also reducing the cost of businesses. So that one can increase the quantity of workers, but it can also reduce the cost for businesses and lead to more investment. From those policies, then you will either get a very broad question about the ability to achieve macroeconomic objectives, in which case you can choose them, or specifics, and the specifics tend to be for the 4 big ones. So the effectiveness of monetary policy to increase economic growth, the effectiveness of monetary policy to stabilise inflation, the effectiveness of taxing and spending to reduce unemployment or increase economic growth, or the effectiveness of supply side policy to have any of those impacts. So it could be any of the 3 policies linked to any of the 4 main objectives, or just a general question around macroeconomic objectives. The other 3 objectives that aren't mentioned there, so the balanced budget, environmental sustainability and inequality, could be used, if they're not mentioned in the question, as either conflicts or trade-offs of the policy, or as an evaluation of the policy that you've looked at. Okay, so here's an example of a 20 mark question on supply side policies. So supply side policies are government policies to increase productive potential of the economy or aggregate supply. On the effectiveness side, we should always draw the graph that shows a supply side policy. I'll not add the labels, but you'll need all the labels and the equilibriums. I'm going to add the labels now. LRAS 2, price level on this axis, real GDP on this axis. If it's increasing real output, so something like privatisation would equal an increase in profits for a business, especially the ones that are in the private sector. This would increase investment, an increase in the quantity of physical capital, increase in the quality of physical capital, which would increase the productive potential, and through increasing the productive potential we'll increase long-run aggregate supply, and this causes the increase in economic growth, y to y1. In terms of reasons why it might not be effective, in this case it may be that the investment is capital intensive, which would mean that there may be no extra jobs in the economy. It may be that the businesses invest abroad, or it might be that the profits are given back to shareholders and not invested. Another thing could be that there's just a low level of aggregate demand, which would be the best one to do, and you can draw the graph to show a low level aggregate demand and an increase in long run aggregate supply with no change to the y on that axis. So low aggregate demand in a recession, no increase in y. Now the it depends upon for that question then becomes it depends upon monetary policy or fiscal policy. So if you reduce interest rates as well, then it'll be likely that consumer spending will increase, aggregate demand will increase, and then you will have the double shift, which you can add in your evaluation to show that the supply side policy is working as long as it's combined with the monetary policy.